Our first speaker is the president of Universal Peace Federation USA. We're delighted he could be with us today because literally he travels the world on behalf of UPF, and almost every week he's in a different place, but we're so happy and grateful that he could make his way here to New Jersey to be with us today. And that is, of course, Mr. Jim Gavin. He is a military veteran, having served in the Navy for 4 years, and on his return from the Navy, he began to work on Capitol Hill on a number of issues. He was the Public Affairs Director for the Washington Times, and he was also the president of Global Image Associates, an advertising agency in DC. He currently owns a company that works and provides legal benefits for employees. As I mentioned, he travels quite a bit. He just came from Japan, where he was on a special mission for UPF. He literally is almost in a different city every week, and we're delighted he could be with us here today. So I'd like to introduce to you the president of UPF USA, Mr. Jim Gavin.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just very pleased to be here today, and want to thank especially Mrs. Lourdes Schwartz for all the hard work she did to pull this program together. Let's hear it for her. But today I just want to set my part of the program up today, which is Fight for Freedom, with a video on the Korean War and the Korean Little Angels. And this will also be connected to someone you'll hear later on, Admiral Lunny, who's going to speak about his experience during the Korean War. So yeah, you can look at this, and I think you'll be able to connect this with different parts of our program today. But this is the Little Angels of Korea. Yeah, I was very inspired by that video when I first saw it. Oh, what do you feel about it? Yeah, it's, you know, when I first saw this, I thought, here, Reverend and Mrs. Moon put up $10 million to really go out and thank veterans from around the world for their sacrifice in Korea. And I thought after I heard that, man, that's what we should all be doing. We should all have the kind of heart that we want to thank our veterans for the great sacrifices they've made throughout our history. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. My dad just died. He just passed away last September. And he was 2 weeks before his 90th birthday, he passed away. But he was, after high school, he went into seminary. He was in seminary for about 3 years, Catholic seminary. He was going to become a priest. And then World War II came. A lot of his friends started going into the military, and they started dying. And he decided, I've got to go. So he left the seminary and he joined the Marine Corps, and he went to a number of places, but he went to Iwo Jima, and he was 3 days on Iwo Jima, and the third day he was hit by shrapnel in his chest and also in his legs. And he was evacuated, and thank God he survived, or I wouldn't be here today. But he did survive, and he had just a small part of one lung left, and then he had another whole lung left. And he still had shrapnel in his legs his whole life. Okay, what I'm saying is not unique for my father. Many veterans went through that kind of situation, and they're going through that kind of situation today. My dad never complained about it. He worked every day of his life, and you know, that was his kind of determination. That was his spirit. That was the heart of a veteran of the United States of America. And I was in the Navy for 4 years. I've got 2 sons. One was in the Army, another one was in the Coast Guard. How many people here have relatives that have served in the military? Raise your hands. Everybody in the room. Let's hear it for those people. When we think about it, freedom is not free. The history of America has been a fight for freedom. George Washington led the American Army made up of citizen soldiers who pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors to fight for America's independence. The majority of Americans stayed on their farms or in their shops, but it was a small, dedicated group of Americans that sacrificed everything for the sake of freedom. Patrick Henry summed it up. He summed up the prevailing attitude: give me liberty or give me death. 25,000 Americans died for Americans' independence. Freedom is not free. There is a price to be paid. The War of 1812, Americans stood and fought for freedom against Great Britain in what's called the Second American Revolution. Washington, D.C. was captured and burned during this struggle for freedom. 20,000 Americans shed their blood. They died for liberty in the War of 1812. The rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. That's our two young ladies here sang that song. Let's hear it for them again. That was Francis Scott Key, a young amateur poet at Fort Henry when he witnessed the bombardment by Great Britain of Fort Henry. Freedom is not free. Over 625,000 Americans gave their lives in the Civil War. That's almost as much as all the wars combined. At the time, the population of the United States was only 31 million people. The price for freedom during the Civil War was enormous. The probability we may fall in the struggle ought not to deter us from the support of a cause we believe to be just. It shall not deter me. That was Abraham Lincoln. Freedom is not free. America jumped into the fight late in the game. However, without the sacrifice of American lives in World War II, the world would be a much different place today. 117,000 Americans laid down their lives. Freedom in Europe was paid for at a terrible price. That's World War I, excuse me. God would never be so cruel enough to create a cyclone as terrible as the Argonne battle. Only man would think of doing an awful thing like that. That's Sergeant Alvin C. York, one of the great heroes of that war. Freedom is not free. The American engagement in World War II came only after the attack on Pearl Harbor. We came late in the game and fought a war on two fronts in the Pacific and in Europe. We won that war, but 670,000 Americans paid the ultimate price for freedom. In an unprecedented act, America turned around and helped its enemies, Germany and Japan, rebuild their nations. America is truly an amazing country, isn't it? Humility must always be the portion of any man who receives a claim earned in blood of his followers and sacrifices of his friends. General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Freedom is not free. The Korean War, which we'll hear more about from Admiral Lunny today. 16 nations came to the defense of Korea in 1950 when South Korea was attacked by the North Korean and Chinese military. 88% of the international forces were Americans. 36,500 Americans fought to the death for the freedom of the Korean people. The safest place in Korea was behind a platoon of Marines. Lord, how they could fight. That's Major General Frank Lowe of the U.S. Army. Freedom is not free. Vietnam. Communism continued its expansion into Southeast Asia, and America once again stepped up to fight for freedom. 58,000 Americans sacrificed their lives for the sake of freedom in Vietnam. I do not believe the men in the uniform who served in Vietnam have been given the credit they deserve. It was a difficult war against an unorthodox enemy, General William Westmoreland. Freedom is not free. Again, let's hear it for Vietnam veterans. The war on terrorism in Afghanistan, in Iraq, the terrorist attack on 9/11 on New York and Washington, D.C. brought America into the war on terrorism that still goes on today. To date, 6,300 Americans have sacrificed their lives in the Middle East to fight for freedom. This is not a battle between the United States and terrorism, but between the free and democratic world and terrorism. That's Tony Blair from Great Britain. Freedom is not free. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. That's a freedom fighter from Ireland, Jean Philpott Curran. Let us be grateful to the brave veterans throughout American history who have preserved our freedom and liberty for America and for the world. Without their sacrifice, the world might be dominated. It might be dominated today by oppressors and tyrants of the past centuries. Thank God. Thank God for those who stood up and fought for freedom. Freedom is not free. It was paid for at a great price. My theme today was freedom. And we will continue to bring you programs through the Universal Peace Federation based on family, faith, and freedom. We want to bring you programs that will inform and inspire you on the importance of being ever vigilant. We must always be prepared here in America to stand up to the threats to freedom in the world we live in today. Let's work together to form a coalition that will stand for liberty and justice for all. Let's remember that freedom is not free. Thank you very much.